It's great that we can be together. If you've been with us over the last few weeks, you know we've been looking at the book of Ruth. If you haven't and you're just joining us, welcome. We're glad you're here and you've come on a good week. We're going to just kind of wrap it up in Ruth chapter 4. And so if you'd like, you can turn your Bible to Ruth chapter 4, little book in the Old Testament. What a great story. So much, so many layers to it and so many cool things going on. I've been at this church. We came here in the end of the summer 2018, so just over 5 years. So it's been a while. I remember when we were first planning the move, because we came from Ontario, so we didn't know anything about the geography. I hadn't really been in this area before, and so I'm looking on maps and kind of getting the lay of the land. And if you've grown up in this area, there's some things that you're not aware of, probably because you've just always seen it. But there are some weird place names in this part of the world. They're fun, but Kamloops. Just stop for a sec. What is a Kamloop? And why do they have so many of them up there? Salmon arm. Now, I've had a fish stick and a chicken finger. I did not know what a salmon arm was. Like, the fish have arms out there? This is going to be interesting. And I remember one name that stuck in my head. The name of the lake that the salmon arm is part of. I'm like, Shuswap. Shuswap. And instantly, this Bible story came to my mind. And I haven't had a chance to unpack this yet, but I've been carrying this for 5 years. This is very cathartic for me. We're going to read about a shoe swap, a sandal exchange, trading footwear, and the significance of it in Ruth chapter 4. This has nothing really to do with the message, but I couldn't get around it, so you're welcome. The main idea of Ruth chapter 4 is not the sandal exchange that happens, but what it signifies. And some of you are like, what is he talking about? We'll get there. We're going to read the chapter. But we've been talking about Ruth and Naomi, and we've met Boaz, this man who is of noble character, and he is part of in the family relations, he's close enough that he qualifies as someone who can redeem the property, the estate, the family of the late Elimelech, the man who passed away in chapter 1, like in the first paragraph. He didn't make it out of the first paragraph. And so we left off last week in at the end of chapter 3 where Ruth, the young widow from Moab, had gone and approached Boaz, this established man with a reputation and some property. She had been gleaning on his farm, and he had shown great kindness to her. And she did this bold move where, following her mother-in-law's advice, she went to him at night when they could speak alone. And we talked about how it looked shady to us, but it was not, if you understood what was going on. But she basically put him on the spot and said, redeem us. Rescue us. Step up and take financial responsibility for the estate of Elimelech, and that means marrying me. So it was this bold, romantic, but a little weird scene on the threshing floor that we looked at last week. And when it ended, Boaz had sent her home, and he's like, I'll take care of it. And she goes home, and Naomi's like, so how did it go? And she's like, this is what happened. And Naomi's like, just you wait. Boaz is not gonna rest until this is done. And we jump into chapter 4, and we see that she's right. He dives into action. So as I have done the last few weeks, I'm just going to read through the chapter first, and then we're going to see it in kind of 3 big pieces, and it breaks itself apart pretty easily. So chapter 4, verse 1, it says, now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down. That's like the city gate, which was where a lot of the It's like the public square where discussions and business and judgments happen. He went up to the gate and he sat down there. And behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, "Turn aside, friend, sit down here." And he turned aside and sat down. And then he took men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. Then Boaz said to the Redeemer, "Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you." And he said, "I will redeem it." And then Boaz says, "Great, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance." Then the Redeemer said, "I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it." Now, this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, the owner drew off his sandal and gave it to the other. And this was the manner of attesting in Israel, right? Shoe swap. I think that's where the word comes from. It is not at all. Anyway, so when the Redeemer said to Boaz, "Buy it for yourself," he drew off his sandal. And then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, "You are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. Also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought or redeemed to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day." Then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Perez, who Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman." So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without a redeemer. And may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." They named him Obed, and he was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Amminadab. Amminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon arm, maybe? I don't know. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. And Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David. So the chapter ends with this epilogue of a genealogy that leads from this poor, destitute family, this widow from Moab who is determined to stick with her mother-in-law, and it traces it all the way to King David, which, as I mentioned in the first week when we were looking at that's a strong clue that this book was written after David had already risen to prominence. And so the readers of this would be like, wow, that's a piece of history of someone very important, King David. This was set in the period of the Judges before that, right? So this was originally written as kind of a historical explanation, a little bit of a peek behind the scenes of King David's genealogy. And we see that this great man, this anointed king of Israel, came from this humble family. But I want to back up and look through this is really about Boaz, right? This is his time to shine. He's had a few speaking parts, but this is when he starts acting. And we can see a lot of really, I think, important things about his character and such a clear picture of what redemption is all about. So first we see that Boaz is a man with a plan. I think he's been thinking about this. When Ruth came to him, he was certainly surprised, right? Who are you? What's going on? But once he understood that she was open to the idea of marrying him, he takes virtually no time and he's already got a plan. Now, maybe he's super quick, but I think that means this guy's been thinking about this. So he's like, I know exactly what to do. And so he goes right to the city gate. And so that shows right off the bat, and this is in line with what we've been told about Boaz right off when we first were introduced to him. It's like he's a nobleman. He's a man of noble character. So he's going about this the right and proper way. He's doing it on the up and up. He's not being sneaky at all. He doesn't even go to this other man, this redeemer who just, his position in the family means he's got kind of first dibs. And interestingly, I've mentioned this before, he's never named, to the point where when he walks by, Boaz is like a pastor at a church who forgets people's names. It's like, hey, friend, come and sit down here, brother. So great to see you, man, right? Doesn't even give his name because he is not the important. Positionally, he was more important than Boaz. In the story, no, he's not. Right? But Boaz could have possibly gone to this guy privately and been like, okay, listen, let's kind of make a little bit of a private, like a gentleman's arrangement here. We don't have to get the lawyers involved, right? But he doesn't. He does it all out in the open, on the up and up, the way that it was expected. Like this was the right way to do things in this culture. And what he does is very similar. It's very parallel to what Ruth did, right? Like Ruth came to the threshing floor the night before and essentially put Boaz on the spot, right? It's like, we need to be redeemed. Do it. Like, are you going to or not? Like it would have been very, very difficult to come out of Ruth chapter 3, that story, and him be like, I'm not sure. Let me think about it. I think the other guy, let's just pretend this didn't happen and go back to normal. There's no going back to normal after that, right? She was by his feet. Like this has to go forward or go backwards at this point. And Boaz does the same kind of thing. He calls this guy in and he's like, what's this all about? Just sit down, hold on. And then he gathers up whatever they needed for a quorum from the elders of the city, the men, the heads of families that would come and make decisions and hear judgments and these kind of things. And so he kind of gets quorum together and he puts this guy on the spot. Now, some of it is, like he says, I wanted to let you know that Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to Elimelech. I think he is inferring that because Ruth, as Naomi's daughter-in-law, part of this whole kind of family estate, came and said to him, redeem us. So he knew that it's up for sale. There's lots of details we don't know here, right? This was written, as I said, to people where this was past history. He had to explain the sandal thing because they didn't do that anymore. But apparently they still understood inheritance rights and these kind of things where we have to fill in some gaps. I have asked the question, and I've read some different commentaries that ask the same question. They're like, hold on, if Naomi had this valuable piece of property, why is she poor? Why couldn't she just sell it? Why couldn't she farm it? We don't know. We can make some guesses. It was very likely that when her husband left Moab, he entered into some kind of transactional arrangement with a relative or a neighbor or something like that and either sold or leased or made some agreement where the land is technically in his name, but this other person has rights to it. Maybe when Naomi came back, she technically had the right. If she came back with a big bag of gold, she could have probably paid that guy out and said, I'm going to take my property back. But she wasn't able to do that. But somehow in this, it's like come up for sale. So if you're willing to buy, and the The price isn't mentioned, but there is a financial exchange that is implied here. This land is now available, and because of the way when we read the instructions in the Old Testament when the Israelites are going to come into the promised land, it's like it's going to be divvied up, and each tribe and each clan has their own area, and the land isn't supposed to leave that clan permanently, right? It's supposed to come back. You need to keep it in the group. So he says, it is now available, and you're up first, so are you going to buy it? Because if you're not, I would like to. And it's similar, I think, what came in my head was, if you're in a store, and it's a little busy, and you have your stuff, and you want to go and pay for it, and there's someone who is sort of idling in the proximity of the line, but they're not paying attention, they're probably on their phone, and you're like, I don't want to walk around them, because if they're in line, that's rude. But if they're not in line, I don't want to stand here like an idiot while the line moves. So it's like, excuse me, are you in line? Right? It's like that. It's like, I'm ready to pay. You are, it looks, ahead of me. If you want to go, please go. If not, stand aside, because I'm ready to do business. And so in front of everyone, and we have no indication that this was a weird thing. And the guy's response, he's not like, what? What's this? This is unusual. I need to consult my lawyer. It's like, property's for sale? Great. Yeah, I'll buy it for sure. Boaz, I think, he does this very wisely, which is why I think, it doesn't say explicitly, I think Boaz had been thinking about this. He had a plan. I think that he was pretty sure that the property that was for sale would be of interest to this other redeemer, but marrying Ruth probably would not be. So I think he's a righteous man. I think to avoid the appearance of pulling a bait and switch, Boaz begins with the property. The property's for sale. Would you like it? The guy says, yes. And he's like, great, I thought you might. Just so you know, a reminder, for everyone here, with the property comes the care of Naomi and Ruth. She's the widow of Elimelech. Ruth is the widow of Elimelech's son Mahlon. So you have to take care of them. You have to redeem them. And according to the Levirate laws, you need to marry Ruth and have kids with her kind of in Mahlon's name so that the family line continues, right? So you know all of that. It's just a formality. Sign here, an initial here, and then on this page. And dude's like, whoa, hold on just a sec. He hasn't been thinking about this. He's like, land, I'll buy it, right? We, in Ontario, we were living in a farming area. Dairy capital of Canada, apparently. Fight them. They're going to defend that. They're, Oxford County, Ontario. But I knew several farmers in our church, and they kind of said it was like a truism. I don't know if it's the same with farmers everywhere, but they're like, if you own a farm, big or small, and land beside yours comes up for sale, you buy it. You just do. You mortgage whatever you have to do to get it, because it's like, when is that opportunity going to come up? So I think Boaz knew, he's going to be eager to buy the land, but he's like, hold on. I have to marry Ruth, the Moabite. Moabites, like, that wasn't a compliment, right? That was, I'm not going to say what it was like. It was a non-complimentary reminder that she wasn't from around here. She was from the wrong side of the tracks. And so Boaz mentions the land first, then he mentions Ruth, along with the duty to raise up offspring for Mahlon. And I think Boaz suspected the other man was not interested in that aspect of redemption. The part where he could increase his holdings, he was up for that. But the part that had different kinds of costs and responsibilities, he had no appetite for those. And he says, I cannot redeem it lest I impair my own inheritance. I've read so many smart guys' opinions about what that implies. And again, we don't know exactly how things work. It could be that he's like, well, if I marry her and fulfill my duty and have kids with her, then those kids will inherit some of what I have along with my own kids, and it'll divvy the pie up into too small of pieces. I don't want to do that. It might be that this guy was expecting to inherit property from his own father, but if he marries this Moabite, or if his inheritance is going to be divided, maybe he will get less in order to keep. We don't know, but there was, again, his stated purpose is financial, right? Hey, do you want to buy this land? He's like, financial transaction, that looks good. Yes. Do you want to also marry Ruth and all that implies? He's like, financially, yeah, no, I can't afford that. Never going to financially recover from this, right? That kind of idea. So he says, no, I can't. And Boaz he was ready for it, right? Not clearly implied, but it's wondered, and I'm not the only one based on what I've read, if Ruth being a Moabite was a big part of the reason that guy made that decision. He didn't say it. He's like, it's just business. It's not personal. I'm not a racist. She just happens to be a Moabite that I am never, ever going to have anything to do with. Like, right? We don't know. But Boaz has been thinking about this, and he knows who Ruth is, regardless of where she came from. He knows her character. He loves her. He is pursuing her. I honestly think this was the big deal for him. He does not seem super eager to acquire more property, but he's like, I want to get this deal done, and these are just the things I have to check off so I can marry Ruth. But he's going about it the right way. So putting the other man on the spot had the exact result Boaz was hoping for. The other man formally declares that he forfeits his right to redeem, and he passes it to Boaz, right? And everyone hears this. He's like, that's okay. And then we come into this second section where we see Boaz, he is a redeemer. He is doing exactly what redeemers do. So we get this sandal exchange part. It's not the only one. I think Abraham did this too. It was a thing. I don't know. So I got your shoe. So now what? Right? It's, did you keep it? Well, I have so many questions. What if it wasn't your size? You know, you've got one that's falling off. I see why they didn't do it anymore, is what I'm saying, right? They're like, there's got to be a better way. But Boaz steps up as a redeemer. So the sandal exchange formalizes it, and then Boaz makes this very formal declaration. And it seems in the language like he's not just having conversation like coffee with this guy. Hey, Bill, do you want to buy that property? Yeah, I would. You got to marry Ruth too. Oh, no, I'm not going to. Yeah, you know what? I think I will. Like, it's not that. He's saying, right off the bat, you are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. He formally declares before the elders and the people that he is redeeming. And when it says I'm buying, when I'm purchasing, when I'm redeeming, it's the same idea, right? He is paying for and taking on ownership and responsibility for all of these things. It's a very clear commitment with witnesses. And he also clarifies, it's interesting, I think it shows his priorities, right? Because he doesn't say, you're all witnesses. I'm buying this day from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. And then he doesn't start listing the addresses of the fields, right? The big field down by the river over there at this is the address and the lot number, and also this house and this barn and all. Like, he doesn't go into the stuff. Right? Like at an estate, it's like there's this house, and there's a garage, and there's a boat. And he's like, yeah, all of that. But listen, you really need to understand, and he declares this full commitment to Ruth, to redeem her as his wife. Like, there's no half measures. It's like, yep, I am going to bring her into my home as my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. He wants to redeem her as his wife and have kids with her, and he fully accepts the full responsibilities as a redeemer. It's all clear and bold and upfront, right? There's nothing in here that is secretive. There's nothing sneaky. There's nothing selfish. There's no half measures. He's not hedging his bets at all. He's doing nothing to protect any damage that may occur to his reputation by seeming so eager to hook up with Ruth. It's like, wow, like a Moabite, really? He's like, I don't care. He knows who she is, and he had told Ruth, the elders, the smart guys in this city know, they've been watching, right? And so but there's no holding back. He's in with both feet. I'm going to do it. And the people respond. And some of this is formal. I think for them to say, we are witnesses, is what they're supposed to say. You're witnesses, I'm going to do A, B, C, and D. And they say, we are witnesses, done. Thankfully, they didn't all take off their shoes, and Boaz is like, I'm coming home with all these left sandals. Get off the shoe thing. It's just hilarious. So they say, we are witnesses, but then what they say next, and we don't know, is this like the unanimous decision, or is this just the representative of the ones who could speak for the crowd? But they proclaim this blessing on him, right? They say, we're witnesses this day. May the Lord make the woman who's coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. And so it's looking back to the patriarchal history of, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and how they were built up. And then he goes on to say, may you act worthily, or kind of may you continue to act worthily in Ephrathah, Shushwap, and be renowned in Bethlehem, right? It's the same area. May you continue to be a man who acts with good character, and may your reputation grow, and may your house be like the house of Perez. And they are in this area, in Bethlehem, of the tribe of Judah. Perez is their ancestor, and it's like, but may your house be like the house of Perez, who Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman. And that's a fascinating reference. If you know that story, it's like, wow, is that kind of a backhanded compliment? I don't think it is, but, and I'm not going to, phone says you do not have time to preach that story. In your notes, I make a reference to, there's a question about the story of Perez, but suffice it, or of Tamar and Judah, suffice it to say that was a marriage that was similar. It was a levirate marriage. This was a childless widow who then, I'm going to make it sound weird, her father-in-law, she had children by her father-in-law so that the name could be perpetuated. It looked like a dead end, right? Marrying someone and being barren was seen kind of like a curse. It's like, wow, your line is stopping. And this way that it's like, but if God could bless you and then you have kids, it's like, oh, he's continuing to bless your name, that your memory won't be lost in the family history. And he's like, they're basically saying, our whole family is from a setup like the one you're doing right now. May God bless it. And so he's off to the races. And then we see kind of in this, I hope your notes don't have 1, 2, and 2. Mine do. Anyway. Oh no, that is where I'm at. I'm just behind in my notes. Right, so carry on. So the people respond and they bless him, and then we see kind of in this epilogue that the Lord has not left them, and it kind of wraps up the story. We see from verse 13 to 22. It says, so Boaz married Ruth, and she bore a son. And so there's a couple of implications here. It's like, we don't know how long she was married to Mahlon. She had no kids. So some people could have been, that was probably not a great thing in her reputation too. She's from Moab and she's childless, a childless widow. Like, this is a bad deal. But God just clearly blesses them, and they have a son. And then, like we heard from the men talking to Boaz, then the women of the neighborhood speak to Naomi. And they say some very important things. They say, blessed be the Lord who did not leave you without a redeemer. I mean, that can kind of sum up the whole story, right? Things look dark. You were in a bad situation. It felt like you just kept losing. You came back and said, call me bitter, because the Lord has dealt bitterly with me. And they're like, look, he has not left you without a redeemer. And then they speak about her grandson, but they're like, it's like your son, Naomi. Like, Naomi was probably one of those very, very proud, slightly obsessive and possessive grandmas, right? She's got the baby all the time. And it's like, look at my little man. Like, she's just bursting, right? And all of the other ladies in town are like, yeah, Yar, he's so cute. But they say, like, may your grandson be a redeemer to you, which is, it's a play on words, right? Legally, he can't. He's descended from her, but it's like he is that picture of, has God forgotten me? No, he's redeeming me. Look, this baby is proof. And may your grandson have a great name, and may your grandson be a restorer of your life. And it's these powerful predictive things that I think the ladies are talking about Obed, and as he grows up, what he's going to mean to Naomi. The readers of Ruth would have seen, yeah, her son, and when they speak of descendants, it can go generations, right? So in the very same way, David is this descendant. And these things are true of David. He's a redeemer. He has a great name. He's a restorer of life to the entire nation of Israel. And Ruth, who bore this son, is declared to be more valuable to Naomi than 7 sons. That's pretty big. Back then, I don't agree with their math, but sons were worth more than daughters. And 7 meant like all the sons. It's like, she's worth more than any number of sons to you. Yes, you lost 2 sons. We're not speaking ill of the dead, but man, Ruth is fantastic. And so Naomi took care of baby Obed as God took care of Naomi. And then it wraps up with this epilogue that's like, yeah, just so you know, folks, they lived happily ever after. And Obed grew up, and he had a son named Jesse. And when Jesse grew up, he had a bunch of boys, and one of them was this little guy named David, who grew up to kill giants and become the king of Israel and Judah, and God made a covenant with them to promise to always have, that there would always be a man on his throne. So it's like, this got big. It had big implications. We're going to take communion this morning. And I think it's not a big stretch to go from the end of this story to communion, right? Because we read about how Boaz was this redeemer. He redeemed this family. He got up and paid the price and took on the responsibility and literally saved them. And that led to King David. And as Christians, we read this and we're like, yeah, and may your grandson be a redeemer. May your male descendant be a redeemer to you. May he have a great name. May he be a restorer of life. It's like, yeah, that points to David, but we know it points most ultimately to Jesus Christ, descended of this same line. And the Bible tells us that Jesus is our Redeemer, that he came to redeem us from sin. And I wonder if we sometimes kind of forget what that word means. We saw in this story, right? The story of Ruth and Boaz shows us what redemption is like. It's not merely acceptance, Boaz going, yeah, you're kind of cute, you're poor, and you're a Moabite, but yeah, you know what? It isn't mere acceptance. It isn't even a rescue from poverty. It is a transaction that costs. In order to be redeemed, a person must first be legally owned or bound to someone else. You can't just walk up and redeem someone cold. Like, they have to, it means that they were owned. For Ruth, the price of her redemption was the purchase of her late father-in-law's estate and marrying her, which Boaz is like, I see no downside. More commonly, the idea of redemption when applied to a person meant paying the debt that a person owed, which freed them from indentured slavery. Things that are held in ransom, right? If you go to the hawk shop, here, you can have my watch, lend me some money. When you come back with your money, you've redeemed your watch. A person who falls into debt can be sold as a slave, and to free them from slavery, there's a price that could be paid, but good luck. When the Bible says that Jesus redeemed us, so it isn't a picture merely of a king loving a lowly peasant. It isn't even, when it talks about redemption, it isn't even like a picture of a rescue at sea or even a heroic jailbreak. It's a picture of us as indentured slaves who are the rightful property of the master who owns us. Sin. Each of us had a huge debt. We each owed a death. And like Boaz, Jesus redeemed us fully and legally by paying what we owed. He didn't just take us. We were legally not his. And so in front of the people and the elders of the city, he suffered and died in our place. Galatians chapter 3, verse 13 says, Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. He redeemed us from slavery to sin by dying the death we owed. So when we take communion, and I'll ask the guys who are going to serve, I think Mike tagged a few of you, you can just make your way up. When we take communion, when we pass these plates and we take the bread and we take the cup, we're remembering not only that Jesus died, but we're remembering why he died. It was to pay my debt and pay yours. But like Boaz, he didn't merely, there, you're out of poverty, we're good, leave me alone. It was, he brought us into his family. He was motivated by love. When we take communion, we're remembering that. And similar to Ruth, it's like we're asking him to again spread his wings over us and to redeem us. And we're recognizing that he is our only hope. There isn't another redeemer. That, well, if he doesn't, maybe someone else will show up. He's it. And so this bread and this cup it's a symbol in remembrance. It's a symbol of what he paid, of his broken body and his shed blood. Now, I need to say, as I say every time, eating this little piece of bread and drinking this cup in a church does not redeem you. It's just bread and juice. What redeems us is Jesus' sacrifice for us. This is a symbol and a reminder of it. It's a powerful symbol, but don't think, okay, great, all I have to do is show up on communion day and I'm good to go. This is something that we are commanded as Christians to do. People who have already put their faith and trust in Christ as a redeemer. This is something that we do to remember. But the Bible is explicit that those who aren't Christians ought not do this. And I would ask you the same way. If you're here, you're visiting with us, or this is your church, but it's like, I like Jesus, but I don't think I've maybe made that step. When we pass these out, just pass it along. And I say that only because the Bible says that if you eat this bread and drink this cup in an unworthy manner, not recognizing the body and blood of the Lord, you eat and drink judgment on yourself. And it also says that when we eat and drink this, we are proclaiming the Lord's death, and all that implies. He died for me, and that's what I'm trusting in. He died a death that I owed. It is proclaiming the gospel. If you don't believe that, don't proclaim it just to sort of blend in. Who are we? You don't have anyone to impress here. But if you are a Christian, I would invite you to join us. So in just a sec, the team is going to start playing. We'll pass out the bread, then we'll pass out the cup, and then we'll take them together, and then Elia will close the service.